How much time? 30? 30 seconds? I'm on right now. I don't believe you.
Run.
What?
Well, someone restarted the background music. Don't look at me. Oh shit, we're on. Okay, welcome to the Brews at 10 on My Left Eye. I'm your host Lefty. Very warm welcome to you all. Warm welcome, even. Alright, Tuesday Brews Day, people. What's happening? Morbius was first in the chat there, apart from me, reminding you to hit the like button, so smash the old thumbs up there, please, people. Good to see you, Morbius. JK's with us as well. Young Farage wouldn't have survived for 10 minutes at your primary or secondary school. Likewise, I think. Emma Richardson, nice to see you. Good evening. Socialist am I pronouncing that correct? Great to see you. Sorry, I'm using your YouTube handles as opposed to your names. That's why it's that's because it's mysteriously appearing that way in the chat. Doc, nice to see you. Lefty, yes. Thanks for that, Doc Dave. Tease. Ha 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 ha. Great to see you all.
Can you dig it?
Oh, there's a lot going on today though, people. Got to tell you. Bit of a deep dive into that Zack Polanski debate on Channel 4. I got a feature with that as well. Regular viewers might know that now and then. The PMQs game that we have, Keith's Catchphrases, sometimes pops up here and there with little bonus rounds. So we've got a bonus round going on. That's for the Polanski debate. Also the budget. The budget cometh. Are we ready? Are we all prepared? Are we well bent over that barrel? In fact, Reeves's digits are already well into our pockets, so we'll look at what's coming up potentially in tomorrow's budget. There's already been one or two things announced, sort of preemptively. Sugar tax, a couple of things concerning electric vehicles, a few other bits, but we'll get on to that later in the stream. Keith did some photo ops today, made a bit of a prat of himself at a photo op at a school. A bit of a look at that, as well as, well, speaking of which, perfect timing, Moishi on toast. There's been a lot of, in the way of protest that is, going on with Defend Our Juries recently. You might have seen some of the recent content on the channel, please do check it out, exclusive live footage of some of the recent protests. And one of our regular viewers, Moishi on Toast, was at the last 3, was that now? Great stuff. So I've actually got a video as well, upcoming some testimony. A couple of people were on trial. Well, it was the plea hearing, that is, for court cases surrounding the first wave of D.O.J. Action in London in Parliament Square. So regular viewers might remember. We also interviewed Pete, who was at Westminster Magistrates as well. So we're going to be looking at that as well. But where courts are concerned, also coming up on the stream, jury trials could be ending, apart from for severe crimes such as murder, rape, aggravated assault, I believe is in there as well. Bit of a look at that. This is pretty shocking, people. So much talk in the way of justice coming up on tonight's stream. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, they're Dems, comrades alike. I've not said that for a while. I don't have auto cue or anything like that. But good to see you on stream as well, Moishi. I'm not going to give any spoilers away until we've seen your clip from the pre-plea hearing. You try saying it out loud. The pre-plea hearing. See, it's not that easy. Even when you're just drinking tea. Graham Turner's with us as well. Evolution or revolution. Evolution or revolution. Solidarity with Palestine as always. Great to see you on the stream. Quality audience building up. What else is there? Come on, let me just take a look at some of my bookmarks. Yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of the stream. What I just described there. We do have a bonus round of Keith's catchphrases to get us through the debate. Because you do have to say, whether you're a Green member or not, personally I am currently not, but you do have to say Zack Polanski's ruling comms at the moment. He's the king of the comms across all parties. I mean, look at what he's in contention with. Farage might be a bit of a, it appears to be latently politically successful snake oil vendor, merchant. But all Polanski has to do is speak the truth, and where Farage is concerned, actually, we'll be going into a bit about that story. A few things have been coming out of the woodwork, a few skeletons emerging from certain closets with regards to his youth. You saw a hint of that. Hint. You saw a hint of that. The opening of the stream. Credits to Cold War Steve, by the way, for that opening meme, the Yesterday channel parody. Young Nigel. The Furage. Reform. Okay, let's not get carried away. Let's see what you're saying in the chat, people. Catching up on how you're all doing. It seems to be yesterday, 1933, Socialists. Very good, very good. I didn't see demo rants on MI6 and PA Zack Polanski yet. I'm aware, I've seen it, I think I saw the thumbnail for it earlier. But, yeah, definitely worth checking out. It's in the queue. Something else that's in the queue, and it's coming up immediately. I think the, you'll have to, excuse me a moment, people, I think the background music might cut off for a moment when we're going to the members. Yeah, it did. And it's the wrong background music as well. What is this, Philip? Goodness me. Who preps this? Which one of the... It was the... Well, it wasn't the smart one. The smart chimpanzee, that's for sure. Pretty sure I heard him whispering something the other day. Or it might just be my imagination. What's he called again? It's not... The quiet one. But he stirs a lot. Caesar, that's the one. But now that we've got the proper settings, let's give the members a due thank you. Yeah, thanks for gifted memberships, etc. recently, and renewing your own memberships as well. Currently on 106 towards the goal of 250. Solidarity, everybody. Really appreciate the support. Other ways you can support the channel. Super chats are open if you're watching live. Super thanks if you're watching back later on. If you don't have the means to contribute via YouTube, there's also a Buy Me a Coffee page. Check out the link for that in the description of this stream or any other content on the channel. Thank you very much, everybody. You can also give us a share across social media. That way of promoting the channel is gratis. We are just 5 subscribers away from exactly 5,500 now. So please do give us a share. Hopefully the next time I join you on a live stream, we'll have surpassed that mark. There's not going to be a special for fractional milestones. It just sort of has a nice ring to it, because you can put the and a half. 5 and a half. Yeah. It's the small wins. No, but really, seriously, pleased with the progress that the channel's made since we began. Not a very, very long time ago. There will be no comedy clip before we get into proceedings, people. A bit bereft the last couple of days, but that last broken news one with Larry and Paul that we had on Sunday was very good. Do have to say their version, their iteration of Ebenezer Good by The Prodigy. Bit of an earworm. But that's what they were going for as they take the mick out of the John Lewis advert, was it? I've not actually seen it. Yeah, to be honest. Avoid adverts and marketing like the plague. Right, let's get into things though, for lack of a comedy clip, because lots to get through. We've got this whole debate, which is going to be a big, chunky old mother, so strap yourselves in for this, people. Also got something to keep us entertained as we go along. Regular viewers will of course know Keith's catchphrases, which features on excuse me, Wednesday live streams, and will tomorrow again at PMQs, but a sort of stripped down bonus version. Just as we get into this now. Before we do though, I'm going to play a bit that Zack Polanski put on his social media the other day. This is Zack Polanski's bold politics thing that he has going on. And again, he's absolutely killing it where the media is concerned at the moment. And he's been very busy as well. So let's see this first and then get on to the debate. Does that sound good, people? Awesome stuff. Just double check that you've hit the thumbs up button on the stream. Let's see what's going on with Zack.
On Wednesday, we'll see the Chancellor in the House of Commons, and I have no doubt she will look sad and talk with a severity of tone about tough choices. But these will be tough choices far too often for children living in poverty, for migrants, for disabled people. They seem to never be tough choices for multimillionaires and billionaires. Some people are working 2 or 3 jobs and still not making ends meet at the end of the month. None of this is inevitable. In fact, much of it is a consequence of austerity. And all I mean is underinvestment in our public services. From the fact that bus routes have been cut, to hospital waiting times, to the fact that your energy bills are rising and rising and rising. It doesn't have to be this way. It's all political choices. So let's make some different ones. Whether it's George Osborne, Jeremy Hunt, or Rachel Reeves, they all think about the economy in one particular way. And it's clear that way just isn't working. So whilst the Green Party would change almost everything about the economy, the budget is this Wednesday. So here's some quick ideas that Rachel Reeves can have to improve the country. And you know what? She can have them for free. Number 1, it's probably the easiest for us all to get our heads around. Tax the rich. Now quickly, who do I mean by the rich? Well, in this country, the 50 wealthiest families own more wealth than the poorest 50% of the population.
And it's like that globally as well. It's just staggeringly ridiculous.
That down, that's 50 families versus 35 million people. There are 156 billionaires in the UK. Let's talk about the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. You probably remember where you were a million minutes ago. We're back in February 2024. Traitors Season 2 is just finished. Great season. You can probably remember where...
I don't watch Traitors either. But yeah, we heard this sort of allegory in the footage that we saw on Sunday as well, didn't we? The difference between millions and billions is, again, staggering.
You're living, who you're dating, you probably still have the same hoodie you were wearing. Now, if you go back a billion minutes ago, you probably don't remember all of that because we're going to 124 AD, the time of the Roman Empire. So unless I'm talking to Nero or Caesar, you probably weren't alive. Now let's convert those minutes into pounds because that's what the wealthy have. Now they couldn't spend that much money even if they tried. So they put their money into assets and that's what we want to tax. A 1% tax on assets of £10 million or more, and a 2% tax on assets of £1 billion or more. That's a lot of money. A lot of people will say, Zack, won't the wealthy just leave? Would you leave behind your friends?
If you've got exactly 1 million, then it's like 10 grand. Yeah. Pretty much. And it won't really be missed. It's just a fraction. It's just a fraction. Good point though, Graham. Yeah, there is a lot of news going on. It's almost impossible to keep up with it all. Tell me about it.
Your family, your loved ones, the country that you love, because you didn't want to pay 1% tax, just doesn't make sense. Point number 2, bring capital gains tax in line with income tax. What am I talking about? Well, right now, we are taxing earned income more than we tax unearned wealth. And whilst we're on the subject of people who earn more money from assets than actually working, let's talk about putting national insurance on investment income. Example. If you're a landlord who has paid off your mortgage, you could be paying less in tax than the struggling renter who is renting the property off you. None of it is natural, it's the result of a political choice. So Rachel Reeves, she should make a different political choice. Point number 3, what about the other end of the scale? How can we make people's lives easier? Well, for a start, every single child poverty expert says that the 2-child benefit cap is keeping hundreds of thousands of children in poverty. This is a Labour government that say they want to tackle child poverty. They have strategies on child poverty, task forces on child poverty. Here's an idea. Let's stop putting children into poverty. And finally, bills are just far too high. And it doesn't have to be this way. We have water companies pumping sewage into our water and charging us extra for the privilege. And these water companies' profit margins are bigger than Shell and Sainsbury's. We don't have to accept this slop. We need to bring these water companies back into public ownership. Now, people will claim this costs too much money, but why don't we listen to the shareholders? They're saying these assets aren't worth anything. It's time to bring those assets back into public hands. Together, we can make hope normal again. And that starts with a fair taxation system. On Wednesday,
it does. That's where you start off and proceed from. Well said there from Zack Polanski. So we're going to get into this debate that he was involved in on Channel 4 now. Actually, just quickly before it started. Right, I think we're all set up. So it's going to be a bonus round of Keith's catchphrases. Like I said, I'm not going to play the intro or anything. Regular viewers will know what this nonsense is actually all about. Because there's a Labour MP involved in this debate, it's not actually Keith himself. Bit of a rarity that it's somebody else who is scoring, but every time the word deliver comes up. There's Postman Twat, by the way. We'll hear this noise. Postman Twat, ready to deliver, or he will be when he fits on the screen properly. The silly twat. Right, there he is. And we'll keep score. You'll see that in the top left-hand corner of your screen. Yeah, so every time deliver or delivering variations still do count, of course. That's, I guess, the only rule. This result isn't going to count towards the league. It should go without saying. That's not a joke. There is actually a league. So repetitive and predictable they get. This is the first time watch for me, though. By the way, I've seen a couple of maybe 30-second excerpts of it, but it's quite lengthy. So let's get started. Any questions in the chat? You almost nodded off. Where was the passion? Oh, sorry. Start raising my voice. Sorry, I am. Got to be honest. It's only Tuesday. I'm already pretty exhausted. Long week already. Okay, let's get into this. There's a bit of an intro here with Krishnan and Guru Murthy on Channel 4. Have at it, Zack.
The Chancellor keeps talking about tough choices, but they always seem to be tough choices for children in poverty, for migrants, for disabled people, never tough choices for multimillionaires and billionaires.
You say, if you tax the wealthy, it'll make everyone's life better. And it's not true. It's offering people false hope.
Nigel Farage says jump, Starmer says how high, and you are handing this country on a plate to Nigel Farage, so I won't take the idea that me on social media offering people hope.
I did almost forget to say, sorry, anyone can say deliver and it counts this time. So it's open season, I guess, just to see how often it's being mentioned. It will be mentioned most often by the Labour rep in this debate, obviously. But you never know. There could be a few others in there.
And saying that if we redistributed wealth and power...
false hope.
It's not false hope. If we redistribute wealth and power around this country, everyone...
Ah, okay. Sorry. You think Zack's a bit monotonal, do you? Interesting. Well, he has a short amount of time to sort of get a lot of things across a lot of the time. I guess you can find yourself being a bit monotonal, but you want to see a bit more sort of Zara Sultana-esque passion with the... Yeah. Okay. Decent comment.
One will be better.
Hello and welcome to the forecast. As Rachel Reeves prepares to deliver the budget on Wednesday, she is facing the political nightmare of having
the one from the host already.
Having said she wouldn't, and she's already made it clear that whatever she does, the burden will fall on all of us, not just the rich minority. But the left and the Greens are demanding a wealth tax, and the right and Reform are demanding welfare cuts and tax cuts. Voters are disillusioned, inflation is stubborn, services are still struggling, and faith in the political centre is evaporating. So how does the Chancellor land her budget without causing a political crisis for Labour or a financial crisis on the bond markets? With me today, Green Party leader Zack Polanski, Labour MP Rosie Writing, one of the new intake last year, and Rupert Harrison, a former advisor to George Osborne in the Treasury, and now at the
US... God, what a... Jesus Christ. What an absolute piece of shit. Imagine that on your CV. Fucking hell, you might as well just... Yeah. You might as well just stamp I hate the poor at the top. In massive capital letters. Advisor to George Osborne, of all people. Fuck me.
Labour MP Rosie Writing, one of the new intake last year, and Rupert Harrison, a former advisor to George Osborne in the Treasury, and now at the US...
Oh, you've got to love how... Well, yeah, she's had a seat for about 16 months, as he just said there. But instead of it being a big cabinet player, because I'm expecting these two to get absolutely roasted and eaten alive by Zack Polanski. But they put up a relatively inexperienced MP. So unless they've got the guile about them, you know. But I don't know. This kind of looks like they've sent a lamb to the slaughter. Labour have, at least. I think this advisor to Osborne, what's his name again? I've forgotten. Shithouse here. We'll probably have a little bit of smarm about him, but we'll see anyway. Not going to interrupt too much. I'll try and talk over more than interrupt, because it's pretty long.
Investment managers, PIMCO, thank you all very much for joining us. Zack, let's begin with the politics of inequality. You have been making the case for a wealth tax. What is it?
Well, ultimately, the Chancellor keeps talking about tough choices, but they always seem to be tough choices for children in poverty, for migrants, for disabled people, never tough choices for multimillionaires and billionaires. Since the pandemic, billionaire wealth in this country has doubled. Meanwhile, our assets, our power, our wealth has been stripped away. Ultimately, I'm saying let's take it back. And the way we do that is partly through a tax on assets. A 1% tax on assets of £10 million or more, or a 2% tax on assets of £1 billion or more, could raise between 12 and 15 billion pounds. Now, it's important to say this isn't just about revenue raising. There's lots of other ways to make sure that we're spending on our capital infrastructure and investment, but ultimately making sure we're getting a grip on the huge inequality around assets has to be the principal thing that the Chancellor does this Wednesday.
So you don't want to cut spending at all. I mean, in terms of the numbers you put on it, 12 to 15 billion, you know there's a lot of scepticism around that, don't you?
Well,
there's no... Oh my God, has mathematics transitioned over to being a belief system now or something? It's mathematics. Yeah, you have to consider taxation and inflation and real terms figures, which, yeah, you do need to do a bit of jostling with, but it's, you know, all you have to do is literally look at what they have, work out a percentage of that, minus, you know, bullshit assets and hidden away money like we talked about on Saturday. But it's pretty simple, Christian, come on. Hitting straight back at Zack there. This is supposedly left-leaning Channel 4 news. Oh, sorry. Almost took that notion seriously for a second there.
I think that skepticism is often from multimillionaires and billionaires and the media that they own, some of the media. So I think a lot of these narratives are pushed. I think it's quite obvious that if you tax very, very wealthy people a small amount, that will bring in a relatively large amount of money. It's always important to talk about the difference between millionaires and
people doing the interviews are on pretty hefty salaries as well, so he's talking about them in this conversation.
The Roman Empire. That's how deep this inequality is. And actually, we're not talking about taxing plumbers or hairdressers or small businesses at the moment, although certainly down the road we need to have a conversation about a fairer taxation system for everyone.
We do. One thing that I particularly am displeased by at the moment, I'll be very quick on this, the way that people like Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer always say that they will support business, and they just use the word business as a very broad generalisation. That could be anything from someone running a tiny stall at a local market to an international conglomerate. Technically, business. So, in just supporting those who are already successful, and I say successful in terms of wealth and how much money that they're actually hoarding, not contributing to the economy. But if they're exclusively talking about that end of the spectrum, then that's obviously a bad thing. And they'll be very, very, very sheepish to try and specify who they mean. But they just business. Could be anyone. Could be anything.
It seems obvious right now that the people who should pay up are the people who are doing extraordinarily well, who wouldn't even really notice this small amount of taxation, and who are making money in their sleep. And the reason why that matters is they're not earning it with their hands or their mouths or doing work every single day. These are people who are accruing that money on their assets, and that is totally unfair. It doesn't have to be that way, and we can make different political choices.
Rupert, why is he wrong?
Well, look, I don't think he's wrong in the sense that I think we will have a wealth tax.
What the fuck was that? Why is he wrong? That's so. First of all, the presumption is he's wrong, and then let's talk about the substance as to why he's incorrect. So, Krishnan Guru Murthy assesses immediately why is he wrong, but obviously it's just an invitation for him to put up a rebuttal. But I just don't like the way that it was phrased, to be honest. Why is he wrong? He's wrong, isn't he? I'm a millionaire. In trainers, with a suit. Channel 4. We're on the left, honest.
Tax of some kind in the budget. It looks very likely that the government are going to introduce, for example, higher taxes on expensive properties. I think it's quite likely there's going to be reforms to capital gains tax. There's probably going to be reforms to pensions taxation. So I think the government, partly because they've ruled out a lot of the other options, they are going to be going for these capital taxes and taxes
on wealth, on wealthier
and
people,
property.
But it's not a wealth tax.
An actual wealth tax. So the issue is that in this situation, you want to bring in, particularly when you've got very nervous markets and you're at risk of sort of losing confidence there and therefore damaging the economy, you want to have tax rises, if you're going to raise taxes, that are predictable, bring in predictable revenue. And the problem is, on a pure wealth tax like this, there are very few international examples where anyone's actually managed to make it work to raise anything like that kind of money. So you have actually seen the Spanish government bring in a form of wealth tax. It's being debated in France. But when
there's a country out there in the broad world. I know it's hard to keep up, but you might have heard of it. It's going to be the biggest economy in the world. China, for example, actually puts caps on private wealth. Did you know that? Has he heard? You know, It's I know it's a bit of an anomaly, a bit of a niche example of a country. Do you know of it? Have you heard of it?
Spanish example, for example, has so many loopholes to make it work. It doesn't actually raise very much money.
That's just one example.
Is it really just beyond the Treasury to devise a tax that works?
The fundamental problem is it's not like no one's ever tried this. It has been tried. In fact, the UK tried a wealth tax about 100 years ago, and then the Treasury ended up having to pay most of the money back. The problem is that when you get to these billionaires, in particular, they're very mobile internationally. They have a choice about where to be based. And so unless you're going to do this as a part of a kind of huge international agreement, you're very vulnerable to losing the revenue and perhaps actually losing revenue rather than raising revenue if you drive those people somewhere else.
Well, we've had wealth taxes since the Doomsday Books.
And the whole thing, the fear of, they get driven away, they are being detrimental to society. They are being detrimental to the economy, even by capitalist standards, because eventually you run out of enough people and resources to exploit. But the point is, they're not. If they are going to disappear, then that's not even a bad thing. We replace them with someone who pays the proper share of tax and pays the employees properly. Because how many times do I have to reiterate? There's only one way to be a billionaire, I guess outside of the artistic realm, but in terms of business or production, manufacturing, whatever you'd like to describe it as. You are either underpaying your employees, underpaying your suppliers, or overcharging your customers on a massive scale. And they call this business growth. The more that they do that and adapt and open up new outlets or warehouses, whatever it might be, the likes of Amazon is a classic example in the 2020s, well, of the 21st century, thus far, you have to say. But yeah, so, and especially where workers' rights are concerned as well, because the bigger they get, the less that they're concerned, and the more that they dehumanise the people who work for them and just essentially treat them as bio robots that they're happy to replace with actual robots at the drop of a hat, should it be more profitable. So, no, that's not the sort of thing that we're going to miss if taxing these sort of people properly leaves them to vacate the country. I'll help them pack the fucking tons of luggage myself.
So these have been a principal tradition of British politics and ultimately saying we shouldn't have this deep inequality. I'm talking about assets. Those aren't particularly mobile. And I think the really important point here is if you don't have a lot of money, if you live in poverty, you have to make decisions based on the lack of money you have. If you're very, very wealthy, then you're not just going to move because someone's asking you to pay a bit more money. That's the point of being wealthy. And I think we should be more patriotic about our country than that. People invest here because...
And whilst they're still making a profit, they will stay. They will stay because if they leave, they'll see that as a loss.
You ask them for 1% or 2% on their assets and they're going to move, I think has pretty been debunked. Also, I should say, Spain, the solidarity tax is working pretty well. Norway, Switzerland, the place that famously has lots of wealthy people.
They're not good comparisons.
The Spanish tax is raising a fraction of the...
600 million.
At the same time.
Well, let's take that 600 million for a start.
But 600 million is not going to do the things that we need to do to fundamentally change our country and make things better off. But make things better off for families who I think about in my constituency every single day. So I think, to be honest, Zack, it is dangerous that you go on social media, you say, if you tax the wealthy, if you have this tax on assets, it'll make everyone's life better. And it's not true. It's offering people false hope. It's leading them down a garden path that you cannot deliver on. And what
will having more and better public services be detrimental to... How is that a false hope? Don't be ridiculous.
we're doing as a Labour government is putting the policies in place that actually can change people's day-to-day lives. A breakfast club, single mum, like a family that I grew up in, can drop their child off so they can get to work on time.
Fucking breakfast. They did some breakfast clubs, and it's all that they'll ever harp on about, as well as a bunch of extra bogus NHS appointments that they cooked the books to get to the figure of whatever million that was. Those are the only sort of 2 or 3 things that you'll ever hear from a party that's been in power for 16 months. Get real. It is the elephant in the room. The taxation of the very wealthiest in society. we either get with that, or we're doomed. Because free market capitalism, twinned with climate collapse, has led us thus far.
Raising the minimum wage. This is how you change people's lives, not by going on social media and just giving people false hope.
You seem lovely, Rosie, but you're defending a government, or you're part of a government that is keeping a 2-child benefit cap, which is keeping 300,000 children in poverty, cut benefits for disabled people, some of the most vulnerable people in this country, is arming a genocide in Gaza, seems every single week to move further and further towards Nigel Farage, including with migrants and refugees. Nigel Farage says jump, Starmer says how high, and you are handing this country on a plate to Nigel Farage. So I won't take the idea that me on social media.
The spitting image clip that I shared on Sunday of the I'm a non-entity, get me out of here. If you didn't see that latest one from Spitting Image, do recommend you check it out. On the latest episode, they come out on Fridays, I believe, but so far as I know, this one hasn't been removed from YouTube yet.
Offering people hope and saying that if we redistributed wealth and power, it's not false hope. If we redistribute wealth and power around this country, everyone will be better.
If you sell people a policy that can't be implemented, that isn't going to bring in the revenue that you say that we need to fix our country, then that is false hope.
Why are you so sure it wouldn't bring in the revenue that Zack says?
Because of the reasons that Rupert said. When this has been tried in countries like Spain, it has...
It's fucking apples and oranges. We're not the exact same economies, and it pisses me off. You know, we can use certain examples from other countries, but when you're talking about economies on the whole, it really is apples and oranges stuff. The UK's economy is mostly based on services. We make the square root of NAFOL. That's completely different in terms of comparability. But not only that, she'll simply deny the success of other countries that have done this, including a lot of the ones that she's mentioned. So it's just lies wrapped in dog shit, wrapped in cat shit.
Driven in the revenue that we need to fundamentally change our system.
We don't compare ourselves to Spain and Switzerland in any other respect,
but also,
do we? I mean, I'm a Labour politician. I agree with the fact that those who are wealthiest in our society should be paying into our system, should be contributing to fund our NHS. And that is why I was pleased to see in the previous budget us make decisions like closing the non-dom tax, putting a tax on private schools, capital gains tax. This is taxing wealth. It may not be the same clip that you can put on TikTok, but it is taxing wealth.
It's crumbs on the table is what it is.
On capital gains, so Rachel Reeves tinkered with it last year and it was welcome, but we still have the lowest capital gains in the G7. If we brought capital gains tax in line with income tax, the reason why that matters is right now you could be the cleaner of this building. You could be paying less, you could be paying more tax as the cleaner than the person who owns the building. That doesn't...
As a proportion of your wealth.
Right. Yes. That's not natural order. That's a result of political choices. And this Labour government, a Labour government, should be making different political choices. But in every single opportunity, they protect the wealth and power.
He did to emphasise Labour government as well. I'm sure a lot of us feel that. He's trying to win over former Labour voters and former members and campaigners as well. I dare say. He's bang on the money.
Power of the super rich. Meanwhile, working class communities in this country are struggling badly, and it doesn't seem like in this budget they have any plans to turn this country around.
I mean, we asked a lot of businesses, we asked a lot of the wealthiest in our society. The wealthiest in our society are paying more tax since the Second World War in order to fund our NHS, in order to put our public finances back on a sustainable footing. These were Labour choices. They were fair choices. They're what the public elected us to do, and I think that we will continue to make them this week.
I mean, Rupert, the argument that's often made is that the wealthiest 1% already pay about, 30% of the tax raised
in income tax.
In income tax. I mean, is there a limit to that? You know, and where do you get the idea of that limit from?
I mean, sadly, there is a limit.
Yeah, we need a cap, and we need to say, look, when you become so wealthy, whether you want to say it's however many billions or hundreds of millions or double-digit, whatever it might be, double-digit millions, so on. There has to be that. You have to turn around to them. And I played a comedy clip a very long time ago that summed this up perfectly well, of a wealthy person going in to make a large withdrawal from a bank, or a large deposit, sorry, some tens of millions. And balloons fell and there was a big celebration, and the teller informed them that they'd won capitalism. Yep, you've won That's enough. That's surely plenty for you to live a comfortable life now. And society welcomes the contributions that you're making to it in carrying on in what you're doing. But as far as your personal wealth goes, this is the end of the line. And just you watch, do you think, a pharmaceutical company, an American pharmaceutical company would be a very good example, I guess. Do you think their real interest is in treating or curing whatever it is that they manufacture and then sell at a high price? If they couldn't make a profit from it, you watch them. They'll disappear. You won't see them for dust. Honestly, let's say how much they really care about making people better or happier or whatever it is. And that'll happen across the board.
Yeah, I mean, because the point being that what we've seen is that the wealthier are relatively comfortable compared to the rest of the country, and most people can't move. I mean, I have super rich.
I have the great advantage of, unlike these two, not being a politician, so it's a bit easier for me to say, look, it's really complicated. So look, the truth is, it is really complicated. It is. The truth. So if you look, in some ways, at the UK tax...
The former advisor to George Osborne. His name's Rupert, by the way, not a particularly common working class name these days, from what I hear tell, in most popular names for people at the moment, but... he thinks it's complicated, and it might just also happen that he might be a millionaire as well. But it's too complicated. Something that's essential shouldn't be dismissed just because it's complicated. So first of all, he's almost admitting that it is a solution, but it's a complicated one that's too labyrinthian for us to bother going through. So let's just carry on the way that we've been doing. Not the best argument in the world.
System. It's already the most progressive tax system of any developed economy in terms of the ratio of tax paid by the highest earners in terms of rate to the tax paid by the lowest earners. And that's because this government and also previous governments have done things like increase the personal allowance, and we have a very high top rate of tax of 45p. And that means that we're now very, very dependent on that top 1% of earners to pay a very high, as you said, very high proportion of tax. That means, therefore, that you really need to work hard to keep attracting those top earners, make it an attractive place to
still wake up every morning and be billionaires.
All the evidence and the
talking about a single-digit percentage, for Christ's sake.
By the independent OBR, that's not a political body; they're a bunch of economists.
If it was a choice between that and a revolution,
that the current top rate of capital gains tax is probably about actually the revenue maximising rate of corporate capital gains tax, because if you start raising it higher, you'll have people moving away, and you'll also have people choosing not to sell assets, because you only pay capital gains tax when you sell an asset. So unfortunately, we are pushing up against the limits. There are definitely things you can do, and I expect that we will see that in the budget. Things like additional council tax,
buy the assets as a tax dodge in the first place.
All economists would agree it's absolutely not progressive because it's based on very outdated valuations. So I think we will see action there. But unfortunately, the government is limited by the reality of what you can raise.
See, I don't think it's that complicated. We still have the lowest capital gains in the G7. Now, look, the 50 wealthiest families in this country own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the entire population. That's 50 families versus 35 million people. And the collective wealth of those multimillionaires and billionaires, they're earning £35 million every single day. Not every week or every year, every single day. And so to hear people say there's no wealth in this country, or it's not, it's too complicated, or it's too new.
They're taking £2 every day off us each. We're just £2 a day, £2 a day across the entire population. Oh, hang on. What was the start again?
50 wealthiest families in this country own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the entire population. That's 50 families versus 35 million people. And the collective wealth of those multimillionaires and billionaires, they're earning £35 million every single day. Not every...
I thought 50 pence then, sorry. But it's, still a fucking liberty.
Week or every year, every single day. And so to hear people say there's no wealth in this country, or it's not, it's too complicated, or it's too nuanced.
I don't think we said that wealth is too complicated.
But what about that argument? Because these refrains, as you say, they're going around social media a lot. The top 50 families being so absurdly wealthy. and the top 20,000 people also, having more than £10 million.
So I imagine 50 families in a large function room, whatever. Just literally the members of the family, the nuclear families. And these parties cost £35 million, and they have one every day, every single day of the year. Bank holidays included.
In the bank, why is the Labour government not saying there's something wrong with that?
I want to see the economy rebalanced. I want to see constituents in my constituency who work hard, work difficult jobs, are coming home still worried about the weekly shop, still worried about how they're going to pay the energy bills. I don't think that by simply a tax on assets, I don't think that's a silver bullet that the Green Party are going out on social media and selling, that's actually going to solve those problems. What I want to see is people brought out of poverty. And the only way we're going to do that is real policy that change the way this economy works.
But take on Zack's argument about property. I mean, we're very likely in this budget to see a new regime in which houses over £2 million or whatever the threshold ends up being, end up paying a higher tax every year. You could raise a lot more, couldn't you, from the super rich who've got billions in property?
I'm not going to speculate. I don't know what's going to be in the budget on Wednesday, so I'm not going to speculate on this.
The principle of taking more from that 50 people, 50 families, doesn't seem to come up.
Yeah, I think the wealthiest should be contributing to our economy in order to fund our public services. I think that's a principle that is deep rooted in Labour values and in this Labour government. I just don't think what Zack is selling people will actually do that. I think what we need to do is things that we've already announced in the previous in the previous budget. Things like taxing private jets, like I spoke about, the non-dong absolute capital gains tax.
The kind of private jets that Keir Starmer takes to climate conferences. Give me a break.
Private schools. This is taxing the most wealthiest in our country. And in the previous budget, we raised taxes and we asked the wealthiest in our society to hold the biggest burden so that we could fund the NHS and make people's day-to-day lives better.
Annoyed with Zack's sort of social media promises, and I wonder whether is that because it's pulling Labour to the left
you out, that's
into
why.
A position that is politically unsustainable?
No, I am annoyed by it, honestly, because I think that it is the exact same technique that Nigel Farage has. People have very, very difficult lives at the moment, and I know that. I hear it from my constituents. I hear it from my friends. I'm in my 20s. Like, I know that life is difficult at the moment, and whether it's Nigel Farage or Zack Polanski going out and telling people, if we just do this one thing, your lives are going to get better, when I think that's not true. I think it's dangerous, I think it's divisive, and I think it's offensive to the electorate.
Well, I'm really honoured to be living rent-free in Labour MPs' heads because they obsess about my social media. And I'm not surprised because we're seeing thousands and thousands of people join the Green Party literally every single day.
Nice sick burn there.
1,000 members, including 40,000 young people with the largest youth movement. The main thing I want to say, though, is, I just spent time with...
Yeah, they're on 175 now, is it? Soaring.
2,000 sixth formers at Westminster Hall, and just spoke to them for a long time about their futures. And they're very clear that the Labour Party are not offering what they need for the future. And I've never said that a wealth tax is the one thing that will deal with their future. You talked about bills. Let's lower people's bills. Let's nationalise the water companies. We have water companies right now pumping sewage into our water and charging us extra for the privilege.
And then you'll say it's impossible, or we're already doing that.
Water companies are making more profit in the terms of the margins than Shell and Sainsbury's. Now, it's not going to cost any money to nationalise the water companies. I don't say that. The shareholders say that. They say our assets aren't worth anything. And we have a Labour government. Look, if this Labour government was around after the World Wars, we wouldn't have got the NHS. People would have said, it's time to invest. You would have gone, it's too difficult. You're offering people false hope. We could never do a project as big as that. There is no imagination, no vision. You only protect your vested interests, oil and gas companies, gambling companies, armed trade companies, and it's pretty much time.
Rupert,
I have no vested interest. I am someone who came into politics from a working class background. I sit here with Labour values. As a Labour MP, I do not have vested interest.
I'm talking about your party. I have no idea.
Well, we've heard this from Angela Rayner. We've heard this from all sorts of people now.
About your donations, I'm not accusing you. I'm talking about your party.
I don't think that's fair.
you know, I know you're not a politician, but are politicians on the right and the Conservative Party reform, you think, looking at this argument on the left and rubbing their hands?
Obviously, the Conservative Party are just as worried about reform as all the other parties are, I suspect. But I think that this argument is, from a centre-right perspective, is a slightly depressing argument, because we're sort of dancing on the head of a pin about who can tax the rich more or who can provide sort of easy solutions. When you think about sort of businesses and investors looking at the UK, we really need to be having a conversation about stability.
He's the one growth, dancing on the head of a pin with his. It's very complicated.
The budget hopefully will address that is slightly being missed.
Rupert extraneous here,
and that is little measures, is it?
Well, no, I think that clearly,
because to a lot of people that is like, well, that's just business as usual, and business as usual isn't working for most people, is it?
Well, it has been. Look, it's been a very difficult few years for growth.
Well, it's certainly not big business for anybody who manufactures ties, judging by this debate panel here.
We've had, we had the COVID pandemic. We've had certainly the ongoing impact of Brexit. We have had, the energy shock. Like, clearly, it's been a very difficult period, and governments.
We've had Brexit. Yeah, we've had Brexit.
But we actually face
quite
a dangerous moment in this country, and I think there's a kind of bigger conversation. We've got a budget that really needs to restore confidence in the UK that has certainly been shaken a little bit by events of recent months. So how restore? Well, I actually think the government will probably manage to achieve this in the budget, because in the end, the Treasury is quite good at putting together budgets. And I think that they will deliver a budget that delivers more headroom against the fiscal rules, that can reassure international investors that sadly we rely on, that there's a plan to get the deficit down. And then I think that can be a bit of a clearing moment, because almost the most damaging thing that we've had over the last couple of months has been just the endless speculation. This cycle every 6 months of speculation, driven really by the decision to have such a small amount of headroom against the fiscal rules, means that every 6 months we're back in a situation where families don't know what tax they're going to be paying, businesses don't know what tax they're going to be paying in a few months' time, people saving for pensions or investments for the future don't know. And that has a freezing effect on investment. So I think it's, certainly international investors
who's, saving for investments and pensions. Yeah, a lot of people this time of year are going to have to choose between putting the lights on, food in their stomachs, or putting the fucking oven on.
We'll be hoping that this budget sort of slightly draws a line in the sand, establishes a clear plan to get the deficit down, and puts to bed a lot of this speculation, so you can just have some basic stability, which is the kind of first basic ingredient for getting, decent growth back in the economy.
I mean, that sort of opens up the other big argument, I suppose, that would be between the two of you about international investors and the bond markets. I mean, Zack, you seem to be saying we shouldn't worry about the bond markets in the last couple of days.
I don't think
and saying that debt to the Bank of England isn't real debt.
I think we should be worrying about people in this country who elected the politicians. So I'm talking about cleaners, teachers, nurses, the people who are actually generating the income in this country and the well-being of this country. I'd object to the characterisation of the Labour government as on the left. They're giving fossil fuel subsidies £3.2 billion. That is destroying this planet. We have one of the most nature-depleted countries on Earth.
All right, but let's talk about the bond market.
Well, absolutely. Well.
Oh. Just the fact that he interrupted with that when he was at the point of, don't you get it? The world as we know it is going to end. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the bond markets. Fuck. We're fucking doomed. We're fucked, people. God. Chris Hughes, good to see you in the chat.
Between the two of you about international investors in the bond markets. I mean, Zack, you seem to be saying
giving fossil fuel subsidies £3.2 billion. That is destroying this planet. We have one of the most nature-depleted countries on Earth.
All right, but let's talk about the bond market.
Well, absolutely. Well, this all links in, because ultimately it's about selling out our nature, selling out our communities to the bond markets, as opposed to going a politician's principal job should be about protecting people and planet. Now, on the debt and the deficit, it's not that it's completely irrelevant. It's just that ultimately the question always is, we talk about borrowing and borrowing to invest.
But spoiler alert, trickle down hasn't worked.
From the Bank of England. We literally owe it to ourselves. A lot more of the money is from foreign countries. It's stored as assets because...
But when you say we owe it to ourselves, what are you suggesting? Are you saying we can write it off? Although we can just print more and it's fine?
Well, you don't print money in that same way anymore.
No, because then you end up like fucking Zimbabwe or whatever.
It's basically simple Keynes, really. What I'm saying is anything we can do, we can afford. The limitations, because there are rules, are inflation based on the amount of resources
we have. So we could just keep making more money and spending it?
Up until the point that we have inflation or we run out of resources. But by the way, we have much more important boundaries. And the boundaries are ecological boundaries and climate boundaries. So we both have to watch inflation in terms of making sure that everyone is employed properly, we have enough resources to do the things we want to do. But investing in hospitals, investing in schools, investing in infrastructure, that's exactly what our country should be doing. And I think decades of austerity has programmed people's minds with we don't deserve better or we can't have alternatives. But actually making sure we're investing in our communities is the exact way to keep the economy moving. What we're getting from both these panelists, I would say, is different forms of trickle-down economics, which has been demonstrated over and over again to fail. And crucially, people die as a result. That's how serious these consequences are.
If Zack was delivering the budget on Wednesday, how would the bond markets react?
Zack has just set out something called modern monetary theory, which is a sort of idea that you don't need to worry about bond markets or deficits. And it's a little bit like the last 5 years with inflation and high yields never happened. So this was an argument that we had during the previous decade, after the financial crisis up until 2020, when central banks were doing QE, i.e. they were buying up government debt, interest rates were zero, and then there was an argument about whether governments could boost economies by spending and borrowing.
Austerity.
But the difference is that, as Zack said, we have had the last 5 years. We've had a big inflationary surge. We've now got interest rates quite high. And in this country, in the UK, we still have inflation stubbornly above target. So if you tried that approach now, we actually saw the risk. I don't know if Rupert and I occupy the same universe, but I'm pretty certain I recall reading yesterday that, and I'm going to get onto this later in the live stream, the OBR has projected lower growth, air quotes, growth than expected, not just at the moment, not just coming up to and after the budget, but certainly 100% definitely for the rest of this parliamentary term. So I don't know where he's getting this idea from. Of that with the Liz Truss budget. If you tried that approach now of deliberately going out to deliberately, if Rachel Reeves said, I'm going to junk my fiscal rules, I'm going to spend and borrow more, actually that would result in the Bank of England having to raise rates further. That would basically undo any positive economic impact because they have
just
to
lay out, because not everyone is an economist.
What
does that actually mean? It means the government paying a lot more for its debt.
It would mean the government, not only the government paying a lot more for its debt, but actually the rate that the government pays for its debt sits underneath every other interest rate in the economy. So every interest rate that a business pays to borrow to invest or that someone pays on their mortgage sits on top of the interest rate that the government pays. So if you go out and borrow and spend in an inflationary high rate environment, you will see higher interest rates, not just for the government, but that matters because we all pay that debt interest through our taxes.
And we would see the graph.
We pay more on debt interest than we do for education.
It would go through the ceiling this time.
So we know these risks. So I think we've got to confront.
As he jumps out of the trenches, Christian and Guru Murthy, to run scream, we don't want another Liz Truss, and that's what Polanski's going to do. Who wants to tax me? And everybody else, including himself, if he becomes a member of Parliament as well. Let's not forget. But yeah, oh God, the line on the chart would go up, wouldn't it? Like Liz Truss. You don't want that to happen, viewers.
Confront these risks, understanding that the last 5 years have happened. This is a different world now, and that's why this market constraint is something that we as a country have created by choosing to borrow billions of pounds from markets.
So Zack, how do you escape that market
constraint? We need to be clear if we're talking about primary bond markets.
It's like he surprised himself by actually understanding something about economics or
the opposite example.
Someone describing something about it at least.
Under your frame to fund unfunded tax cuts. I'm absolutely not saying that's what we should do. Actually, it's the opposite.
The markets were, if anything, more worried about the massive borrowing she was doing to fund spending on the energy subsidy scheme. So it was a mix of very, very large spending plans together with
just a couple of days after Liz Truss and everything settled down. The Bank of England could have adjusted.
She had to fire her chancellor and reverse all the policies.
But you're making it's the problem around the Bank of England independence.
Okay, so again, they just sell them and call it debt. They don't sell them for nothing. But they do sell them and count it as a loss.
Actually, I think the conversation we nearly Sorry.
No. I mean, I'm just trying to work. Are you saying that interest rates wouldn't go up? Or are you saying it doesn't matter if they go up?
I'm saying it matters in terms of making sure we're relating it to resources. We've had years of trickle-down economics, and we're in the exact situation we were just talking about.
I know that's the argument, but if you've got all the people in the markets and people like Rupert saying the interest rate would go up if you did that.
But of course, the people in the markets will say that.
How do you escape that trap?
The question you're really asking me is, are very wealthy individuals worried that what I'm talking about is not moving our public wealth to private capital, which has been happening for decades now, but keeping it as our public wealth and spending it on our communities? When we talk about deficit, what we're really talking about in deficit is money that has gone to our communities. If we talked about surplus, what we're really talking about is where we're not spending money on our communities. So we need to completely change this economic paradigm. Now, I know that's going to be difficult for people because that's a completely different way of looking at the economy. So let's keep it very simple. What I'm talking about is spending multipliers, which have existed in our economics for a long time. For every pound you spend, the economy gets money back.
But this is not a new invention.
But, exactly. So can I just say environmental spending, for every pound you spend, you get £1.88 back into the economy.
Sorry,
it doesn't
to go
make
back
sense.
To the economics.
Austerity never makes sense.
So this multipliers issue. So again, this is an argument that we had pre-2000. When you have low inflation and low rates, there's an argument about whether multipliers are high. The problem is when you've got inflation above target, the multipliers are basically zero in the Keynesian sense, which is any money the government borrows to spend is going to be more than offset by the Bank of England having to raise interest rates because it's got to get inflation back to target. So this really feels like an argument that's sort of out of date. Like I didn't realize that the inflation happened and that rates are high. We live in a different world. And sometimes this gets framed in terms of democratic choices, like the bond market is sort of undemocratic.
Every now and then, just remind myself on a macro scale how ridiculous it all is, going over the finer points of markets and this and that, when ultimately you're looking at a system on a planet where there's plenty to go around, even just within, the British economy, within British citizens' lives, and you can't even organise that. You can't even organise the basics, like giving people cheap or free clean water, transport, a roof over their heads, these very, very basic things in terms of provision. But we have to sit through debates over fractions of percentile of OBR, growth expectation versus real terms, this and that, ad nauseum, when it's a political choice not to just reach out there and take the solution. That's the head banging against the wall stuff, really, figuratively speaking. But it just gets to me sometimes. Thought interject.
It is. There is a legitimate democratic choice, which maybe the politicians on the left might want to take, which is you could raise taxes to raise spending. That's a very deliberate democratic choice, and if you can get people to vote for that, it's absolutely fine. Unfortunately, you don't have a democratic right to borrow hundreds of billions of pounds from overseas investors. To do that, you have to be credible, and you have to persuade them that you're going to pay them back.
But notice for credibility and persuasion, because really what we're talking about here is trust. And what politicians 100%. Need to be doing is telling different stories and making sure that the markets understand the stories they're telling. A big problem we've had, and we've really got it with Rachel Reeves right now, and I do agree with what you said a few moments ago, that part of a huge problem here is the uncertainty, that we seem to be swinging all over the place and there doesn't seem to be a vision and a plan. Now, look, I'm not an economist. I'm not going to pretend to be an economist, but I talk to economists regularly, and what they're saying more than anything is there needs to be clarity about what all of these terms mean. And the fundamental problem in all of the conversations about economics
very good point there.
Fixation of comparing a household
in the chat, and the same's true for
it doesn't work like that.
Stock trades as well.
Ago, it felt, particularly in journalism, we were having different conversations about how the economy works. It just feels like that's rolled back, and over again we hear this narrative.
But it also feels sometimes though that's some sort of magic political message. And actually, there is such a thing as money in and money out. And debt that needs to be repaid.
To a point, let's give an example. We had a pandemic in this country, and we created the money to respond to the crisis, and that was the right thing to do. We are in a crisis right now. We're in a crisis of inequality. We're in a crisis of climate. Ultimately, we need to be spending money to make sure that we're borrowing to invest, if that's the phrase we're using, or we're spending to invest, because ultimately austerity is the one proven thing to absolutely not work and to ultimately end people's lives.
We're going to come to austerity. soon, and the whole question of welfare cuts, and obviously Rupert's got an
we've had it for a good while now, Krishnan.
George Osborne during austerity. But Rosie, is this sort of more snake oil from your point of view?
Yes, and I think that we need to be clear what will actually happen to people. There's been a lot of technical talk, but what will happen if we go to the markets? If Zack was delivering this budget and we went to the markets and we massively increased borrowing, it would mean families in my constituency would pay more on their mortgages. We saw that under Liz Truss. There is a real human impact of just going to the markets, going and just borrowing. We saw it under Liz Truss. Yes, that was for partly for tax cuts rather than spending. But
I believe she called it snake oil, the concept of taxing the rich.
To be honest, when I still knock on doors in my constituency, the devastation caused by Liz Truss's, frankly, her trickle-down economics, which we will not return to, is still felt in families' day-to-day lives.
But long-term interest rates went back up to beyond Liz Truss levels.
Yeah, but
long after that.
Yeah, but the damage caused sets in. I have friends who got on the housing ladder and then had to sell their houses to go back into rented accommodation because of the impact of Liz Truss's mini budget on their mortgages. That impact is still felt day to day in people's lives, and we would see the same thing under Zack's economics.
I mean, what Rose is worrying about here is essentially debt to GDP ratio, which is about 100%.
These aren't concepts that are exclusive to Zack Polanski.
Japan has a
He's just doing a very good job at communicating these to the public. We're going to start with the Polanskiism next, the same as they did with Corbyn when it's nothing exclusive to them.
It's the speed
I think
of
the other real issue we have from the Labour government is this constant focus on GDP. Simon Kuznets, the person who designed the idea of GDP, says this is a terrible way to measure the health and well-being of the country. We should actually be talking about mental health. We should be talking about equality. We should be talking about communities that feel like they're cohesive and they live with purpose. This constant focus on economic growth as the priority and the only measure is destroying our country.
Rupert?
I don't want to come back and be the economist here, but Japan is in a very dangerous situation. So Japan is now seeing its interest rates rise and pressure on its currency because international investors are starting to say, well, this 200+% of GDP debt maybe was sustainable when your interest rates were zero. But what does it look like now that your interest rates are normalizing? So it's still running a risk for the future. Japan is also, again, this is a bit complicated, but Japan is in a very different situation because it is a current account surplus country. So Japan exports far more than it imports, and therefore it doesn't need, in a kind of national sense, to be sucking in capital just to live.
I've said that in terms of apples and oranges. Yeah, we manufacture, export practically nothing these days.
Much less tolerant of high debt to GDP in countries like the UK, which is what you can see in the market reaction to the Truss episode, or more recently to some of the wobbles, and what you're seeing in countries like France, where again concerns over fiscal sustainability are having real impacts on interest rates.
So can I move us on?
Well, he's kind of contradicting himself, though, using Japan as an example when he himself identified the difference in the very basis of our respective economies.
To spending, then, because obviously from the right, the demand is you need to cut spending. You helped guide Britain through austerity, or partly the architect of austerity. I mean, do we need another period now of massive cuts?
I mean, look, I think that the immediate challenge is one of confidence, and like, can this budget, as you know, we've all talked.
But the Labour are listening, but you probably don't need to prompt them, as we're going to find out tomorrow.
About the uncertainty of this period, like, can you get a budget that, in a sense, is a kind of clearing moment that provides certainty for markets, certainty for business, and then the government can focus on its priorities, people can focus on investing for the future. I think that from the point of view of international investors coming back to the markets, who we do...
Red F, I think the Grim Reaper's got a bit more charisma than the Labour representative here, or just Labour in general, I guess. I'm not... she's been put up to do this. I think it's not a fair
health and disability benefits rising very rapidly. If there were
sort of level of experience, is it?
Limit the rise there. We're not necessarily talking about reducing the scale. I think that would be seen as credible and permanent. That's another reason why markets, when it came to tax rises, I think took the view, and most economists took the view, that
just switching off when he
probably raising income tax. No one likes paying tax,
I'll just talk over Rupert here with what else can we talk about? Well, markets and bullshit this and what about recent sports statistics or something? Anybody read any good books lately?
it's going to be tax rises that are predictable.
Been to any interesting places?
Because again, if you're just, dealing with novel tax rises where you don't necessarily know they're going to...
He's still going there. In the meantime, we're going to watch Dances with Wolves, and then we'll come back and see if Rupert's finished.
A lot of people think we are still living with the consequences of austerity, that the impact on public services, on the wealth gap, on poverty, on child poverty, is partly as a result of austerity. I mean, do you accept that now?
Well, austerity means different things to different people. So, the period I was in government, 2010,
there is a clear definition.
That was really dealing with an economic crisis in 2010. So this was not, we were borrowing, the government was borrowing.
Of course, austerity, it's not like just, cutting public services whilst allowing the wealth gap to increase. No, it's not about that. It's not about burdening the poor with the absolutely crap decisions of the unregulated financial markets that you bow down to and worship so much, Rupert. Oh dear.
£1 in every 4 that it spent was borrowed from international markets. The UK had a budget deficit of more than 10% of GDP, worse than the fiscal situation we're in now. And it was a moment of genuine crisis for the UK. And that's why you had a coalition government. It wasn't an ideological approach. You had Liberal Democrats and Conservatives in coalition saying, well, we're going to do a combination of tax rises. Remember, that government raised VAT, raised more than £10 billion of raising VAT.
But do you think you envisage the long-term impact?
Well, I think that, there's a democratic argument about what's the right level of tax and spending on public services. And certainly, as you said, I was a Conservative candidate.
This explains a lot where George Osborne and Cameron are concerned if they have this sort of stuff in their ears every single day. An advisor, specifically to George Osborne.
We're willing to pay more taxes, even though the Labour Party said it wouldn't raise taxes. In my experience, all the voters expected that they would. And I think there was a decision by the voters to elect a Labour majority, a very large majority, to have a bit higher taxes and more investment in public services.
So, Rosie, you placed great store in what the markets think. And what Rupert's saying is being said by all the investment managers, that, there has to be some credible cuts in spending as well. Do you agree with them on that as well?
No, I think that the years and years of cuts that we had to our public services is why we see the inequality that we see, why the country is in the place it's in. I think that if you don't fund our NHS, you'll have people on welfare because they're waiting.
Absolute fucking gall. The absolute gall.
To get a hip replacement. I think if you don't fund education properly, you're not giving young people the opportunity they need to go into their work and then contribute to our economy. I think getting the welfare bill down is a separate conversation because personally I think there's a moral case for it. I think that 1 in 8 young people not in education or work is an absolute damning legacy of the previous Conservative government and needs to be something that we address. Work can be a really, really good thing and we need to talk about that more. But I do not think, and I don't think under this Labour government we should go back to seeing cuts to our public spending. So
any reduction in spending has to be couched as not a cut, is what you're saying?
Well, like I said, I think welfare, there's a moral case for it, and I really do. I think that there are people that we've let...
Sorry, I zoned out for a few moments there. Someone distracting me, but just got a message here. Did I miss anything? Did I miss a deliver? I'll get onto this. Get onto this later. It's pretty. Okay. Sorry, this will sound like nonsense to anyone. Not privy to the conversation. Carry on.
Be out of work who want to get back into work, who want the opportunity.
But does that mean compulsion?
Work.
Forcing people off benefits.
No, I think it's by, like with the Tim's Review, making sure that we can create an environment that people feel as though they can try work and not fear losing their benefits, or they feel like there's a work that will work for them around their life. I think there's a lot to it. I think it's complicated, but there's a moral case to get this welfare bill down in this country.
Why do you think so many young people are going on to health and disability benefits at the moment? Do you think they all are disabled and unwell?
I think there's a range of issues, to be honest. I think that if you leave education and you go on to welfare, and you're on welfare for quite a long time, I don't think there's challenges of getting back in to the workplace, and we've seen that. I think that it partly because of cuts we saw under the previous government.
For what jobs and for what kind of deal, and what are you offering people? What are you incentivising people, and what are you creating as well? Is what you have to be asking primarily.
To education, people have left school not feeling necessarily ready for a modern workforce, and they struggled. Of course, a rise of mental health problems. And again, this could be a whole separate podcast, I think, talking about that. But also cuts that we saw under the previous government to our NHS.
In work benefits as well that does contribute to that mental health crisis.
They haven't been able to look at prevention instead of cure, and you can't see that more clearly than with mental health services.
But I mean, because we're told it's a meritocracy. And that hard work will pay off when it doesn't, and it's just pure gaslighting at the end of the day.
I would never use that language.
Obviously you wouldn't, but I mean that's the argument you're up against as well.
I think that there are people that could be in work that aren't, and then maybe they aren't in work because they're scared of losing their benefits, which by the way is a valid reason. They're scared of losing their benefits. They're scared that work isn't going to be economically viable for them, or they're just scared that work isn't going to be good for their mental health, or they're not able to find a job that works around what they're facing day to day. I think that's all valid.
How damaging was it for the credibility of the government to deliver any of these changes, given they've already had to roll back on the welfare cuts they attempted?
Well, I personally was for the government reforming welfare. Like I said, I think there's a moral case for it. And I hear that from my constituents, by the way, quite a lot. People saying, look, I work hard and I feel like I want the person...
You do? You can hear that over the rotting fruits slamming against the window? That's pretty impressive hearing.
What were your colleagues saying, in opposition?
There was, I mean, the public could see this, right? There was mixed views in the backbenches, and
do you think they've got to kind of get real now? Or...
I think the Tim's review is a good forum for backbenchers who have concerns, and everyone represents different constituencies and sees different, and may want to feed in different information, so that we have the time to have that review to then come at this properly that reflects the concerns of the backbenchers. But as I said, I was someone who was for reforming welfare. I don't think we can continue how it is.
Zack?
Up is down, left is right. Poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of money. And to have someone who's working in a department that's privatising the National Health Service, who is cutting spending in real terms, and go, we should not be cutting spending, is very much the definition of saying one thing and doing another.
What do you mean they're privatising the health service?
Well, during the general election, I had a debate with Wes Streeting, and I talked about that they have a plan to privatise it. He put his arm up at me and said, the left are bleating on again. But we've seen it over and over again. Not only are they accepting money from private healthcare, companies are looking at more and more ways of reducing the spending.
So you genuinely believe that we want an NHS that's not free at the point of use?
Yes, I do believe that. I think as quickly as possible that you're doing that.
I think that's a shocking narrative to tell people.
I think we're seeing over and over again the reduction in real-term spending on the National Health Service, the allowance of corporate companies and more private healthcare companies to take contracts. This has happened both with the previous Conservative government, but we've seen it accelerate.
You see, Labour used to say this about the Conservatives, and the answer was always surely it would be political suicide to...
Don't do it all at once, Christian. Don't be so fucking naive. You must know what's going on here. How long has he been presenting Channel 4 News, for fuck's sake? It goes right back to Tony Blair, chopping it up into tiny pieces, compartmentalising it, creating these air quotes markets that buy and sell from itself, and you can just do a piece here and a piece there. People won't notice. And that's just one example of how it's done. It doesn't happen wholesale overnight because, yeah, it would be political suicide. It said that even Thatcher in her wildest dreams wouldn't even consider it. But it was in fact a neoliberal Thatcherite who first did that. And Christian Guru Murty knows that. Surely he does. And those donations that Polanski mentioned are valid from private help. Do you think that they just donate and expect nothing in return? Again, it's very naive of Christian to assume that. But that's what's happening. Perhaps they're not saying it so outwardly as Farage is, because he has pretty much outright said He wants the insurance-based system that America has. But under the surface, it's Labour's remit as well. It's Wes Streeting's remit.
It's a part of our country's DNA.
So it's kind of a mad accusation, isn't it, to say Labour wants to make people pay?
What they're doing when you look at the figures in terms of real-term spending and in terms of where that money is going to, it's going to private healthcare. And then also, I didn't realise you've been a Conservative candidate, but I just think we can't take lectures or moral lessons, or not even moral lessons, but economic lessons from a Conservative government that absolutely devastated this country. I don't think it can be overstated how brutal that Conservative government was, alongside the 5 prime ministers who increasingly reduced spending. Increasingly, we saw poverty on the rise. We've seen people homeless. We've seen people struggle to eat. And then the fact that a Labour government came in on a promise of change, but any change we've seen has arguably made things worse. I think that's why we're seeing the so-called centre collapse, because there is no vision, there's no real offer, there's just saying one thing and doing another, and I think people are over it. And actually that's why people want Hope to feel normal again, because actually they're looking to a party in the Green Party who are actually saying, we will invest in your communities, we won't accept corporate donations, these big multimillionaire and billionaire contracts.
Rosie?
I think what we're risking in this country, because we are at a fork in the road, there is a party, Reform UK, that are waiting in the wings to come in, and they genuinely want to move our NHS to an insurance-based system.
And why is that? Why did they go from a party that's won a few seats? And yeah, the media are obviously putting wind in the polling sails, so to speak. But surely the current government bear a lot of responsibility for that. You can't. The lack of self-awareness is just, again, staggering. Excuse me. But she's sitting there wondering, as though the Green Party are in office. She's accusing Zack Polanski of getting Nigel Farage ludicrously ahead in the polls, and the numbers are getting ridiculous now. Circa, again, of 400 seats, and again, equal losses for Labour. So she can't even make that connection. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's causation there, but it speaks a pretty plain picture, if you're asking me.
They want to privatise our NHS. It is a Labour government that invented the NHS.
They also say that they would have free healthcare at the point of delivery, don't they?
I think they've gone back and forth. I think they've said one thing one day, one thing the other. I think it's uncertain what they would do to our NHS. I think our NHS is at risk at the hands of Nigel Farage. It's a Labour government that created the NHS. It's a Labour government that's increased investment in the NHS. It's a Labour government that's got our waiting times down. We promised 3 million appointment, we've delivered 5. I think it is dangerous when we know the risks that are waiting in the wings with Nigel Farage and what he would do to our NHS, that you say that a Labour government is privatising the NHS and doesn't want an NHS free at the point of use. That is against our DNA. It's against what I stand for.
Are you giving more contracts to private healthcare or not?
I don't personally, I don't know the details, and I think you could look at all different aspects of healthcare and talk about them all separately.
So do you think we're reducing contracts for private healthcare?
That a Labour government will always have an NHS that is free at the point of the use.
It can be free at the point of use, and it can still.
Simple question.
But that's not privatising.
It's asking a fact whether they're going up or down.
Yes.
Well, ultimately it is, because it means that we, as the public, are being ripped off because the money that is going to those private healthcare companies...
But that is not the same as what you just said. You said Labour want to privatise the NHS.
Well, that would be privatising. You'd literally be giving it to private companies.
You said that Labour don't want an NHS free at the point of use. I just asked you, I said, does Labour want an NHS free at the point of use? And you said no.
I think that's where they want to get to. But where we are right now is we are seeing the privatisation in terms of the active verb. You are privatising the National Health Service.
I think it's dangerous what you're selling to the electorate,
I think it's more
given
what the government are doing
what is waiting in the wings. I really do.
It'll come with it, Wes Street and whoever. There'll be a temporary reduction in such and such public services, and we'll bring this back, but it's going private for now, and da. Fingers crossed behind the back, and all of that from Wesley.
Rupert, take on the criticism of the Conservatives as well.
Well, I think it's not really for me.
Austerity
it's not really for me to sort of defend a government I wasn't part of. But I think that if I could take a step back and sort of put my hat on as an investor in the UK.
Oh, come on.
I think that this conversation is something that we should pay very close attention to, because while I do think that most people would expect that in the short term, the budget will be a bit of hopefully a clearing moment if there can be a credible plan to deal with the deficit, restore a bit of stability. Increasingly talking to...
So whilst he's yarping on, we'll just go and read Lord of the Rings. Start. Okay. Page 1.
I think it's very interesting, actually, that in just the last couple of months, even Reform, who had, certainly a very sort of fiscally irresponsible manifesto at the last election, 90 billion pounds of unfunded, they've had to backtrack on that. And you've got Nigel Farage saying...
Still going. Fly to New Zealand and back. No, not fly. Don't fly to New Zealand and back. Going to get a boat and back, and they'll still be going on about it.
That and said, okay, well, maybe that's a risk that's maybe kind of
reduced. So do you think they will currently see Reform as more stable than the Greens?
Well, I think that the issue now is that I think that the issue of leadership in the Labour Party has been raised over the last couple of months because of all these briefings and stories. And I don't want to get into political tittle-tattle, because that's not my role. But international investors have certainly noticed that risk, and I think that the kind of pressure on Labour from the left, from the Greens, and the risk that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves could be replaced within Labour.
We acknowledged that Labour are on the right by, obviously referring to the left and Labour separately. Let's just get that again. Subconsciously, perhaps, admitting.
Will currently see Reform as more stable than the Greens?
Well, I think that the issue now is that I think that the issue of leadership in the Labour Party has been raised over the last couple of months because of, all these briefings and stories. And I don't want to get into political tittle-tattle, because that's not my role. But international investors have certainly noticed that risk. And I think that the kind of pressure on Labour from the left, from the Greens, and the risk that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves could be replaced within Labour by a new leadership that might turn to the left, that might be a little bit less fiscally responsible, is something that is already starting to raise a risk premium for the...
Oh, perhaps read your own track record as a party, Rupert. Heavens above.
The UK, and you can see that a little bit on the kind of longer part of the interest rates that we pay.
So a soft left Labour leader, like Andy Burnham or something like that would...
It goes again with the Andy Burnham thing. They're going to run away with it. Even if that does hypothetically happen, and Labour try and scramble it back by going, oh no, we promise we'll be more socialist, is the word that they're looking for. And you can sit there for a month and listen to all the mainstream channels, and I won't be surprised if you don't hear the word socialist or socialism once. It's always the left or, derivatives thereof. But I've lost my train of thought on that one. I was just, just going to add how you can see the syntax. It's all in the syntax. But it won't save Labour any lurch to the left, whoever's leading. And don't start getting carried away with the Andy Burnham stuff. I still think that sort of talks for the birds.
Bring alarm bells.
The point I'm trying to make is we live in a dangerous world now. We live in a dangerous world with high interest rates, volatile macroeconomy, hugely unpredictable international policy from the Trump administration. I think that, be very careful the impact that these political discussions have on real world consequences for people's mortgages and businesses, because, this kind of talk is not free. People are listening, not just your listeners on Channel 4, but actually the world is listening.
So just to be clear on this, in terms of what the bond market's like, are you saying they would like Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves to stay in place?
And all of a sudden, all everyone talks about is the bond markets now, and just can't get away from it. It's I think it's their ultimate hit piece against taxing the rich.
I think that uncertainty, markets don't like uncertainty. They would like to see predictable revenues. They'd like to see a strong government delivering a plan. Absolutely. The risk of, as I say, I'm not raising this because this is something that now gets raised very regularly in discussions, investment discussions about the UK, ever since really Number 10 put it on the agenda themselves with all that briefing a couple of weeks ago. So I think that, we have to now, think that this kind of speculation has real consequences given the world we live in, and has real consequences right now.
How in peril do you think Rachel Reeves is on Wednesday, and how it unravels or not?
Like 1,000 times peril to the power 100, absolutely in peril. There'll be some sort of nickname for tomorrow's budget announcement. There have been these things throughout. Politics, what's like one example, for example, after Thatcher was re-elected again, I think, for the first time, didn't they call Labour's manifesto the longest suicide note in history or something like that? The press did. But where tomorrow's budget's concerned, it'll have some sort of ring to it. But not a good one. Not for good reasons, unfortunately.
Well, first of all, to Rupert's point, I would agree. I think political stability does have real implications to our markets, and actually, who feels
the resignation budget always, or something like that.
Families and the everyday person who I think of in my constituency. I think I'm not going to comment on Rachel Reeves' specific position.
Why not? I mean. But Number 10 is literally, they were literally briefing about Labour leadership a few days ago. I mean,
and I don't think briefing is helpful, and I think
But it's a real debate. You can't deny that if she gets this wrong, she's finished, isn't she? I mean,
I think there's a lot at stake at this budget, but I think there's a lot at stake. I'm not thinking about the leadership.
This is the thing, that what they're hyping this up. This has to be some sort of political opus. Does it some incredible act of political genius, 5D chess, or whatever? No. We know Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer all too well by now. They're steadfast in their resolve to keep going the way that they are. They're certainly not looking like changing course anytime soon. It's not working. It's the definition of madness, isn't it? Expecting different results when you keep doing the same thing.
Of the Labour Party, I'm thinking about the people in my constituency who want better lives, and to be honest, like I said, we're a fork in our roads for this country. So I think there's a lot at stake to make people feel better off, to make the cost of living crisis not feel so prevalent in people's day-to-day lives. Families who I think of, like I said, every single day. The mum who drops her kid off at school and now can drop their kid off a free breakfast club, who can take the other kid to childcare, which they now have 30 hours free, can go and get a good job. I think about those people every single day, and it's that I care about. The leadership of the Labour Party, we can talk about it over and over again, but ultimately it's delivering for people that matters.
It is very likely that you come through this budget, if Rupert's right, that things stay reasonably stable, there's no panic on the bond markets.
No, not sure what your optimism is about the two-child benefit cap being lifted in tomorrow's budget. I'm not too optimistic about that. We've got another deliver in there as well.
You get through it, but you lose political support because ordinary people's taxes go up. They're already feeling squeezed. There's no hope on the horizon for them.
Yeah.
And you are plummeting. In that scenario, Labour MPs will start talking about getting rid of Keir Starmer.
Well, I think in this budget we need to make Labour decisions that make this country fairer. And those people that you just spoke about, I think that we need to think about them.
They're saying it.
Like I said, I'm not in the Treasury. I'm not Rachel Reeves.
But they're all going to be worse off next week.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. This is a Labour government. I don't think that's true.
It's not migrants that bankrupted this country. It's not the left that bankrupted this country. It's not people who are claiming universal credit, many of whom are in work. They're just work is not paying enough. And that's a really key point here.
That's why we increased the minimum wage.
The people who bankrupted this country are the bankers. For people who have bankrupted this...
What is it? About 4% for a certain age bracket, 18 to 24s. Whatever it is, I'll get on to the the budget warm-up later, but it's not across the board either, and it's certainly far from what's required to help people out, minimum wage workers.
Country are decades of Tory politicians and now Labour politicians and their austerity that hasn't worked, and it's time to change course.
And do you see the political instability as a good thing for change?
Well, I think we do need political stability. I don't think anyone's coming on this and saying political instability is a good thing.
But it's helping you, isn't it?
Well, it's helping in terms of people are recognising that what is happening right now doesn't work. The only thing that will maintain right now is the status quo. So I think people watching this have a decision to make. Are we going to allow that status quo through the Labour government to gradually go further and further to the right and end up with Nigel Farage or something even worse as time goes on? Or are we going to say, time to change course? The Green Party are there. I'm not pretending we have all the answers.
Yeah.
What I am saying is what we are doing right now isn't working. And this is absolute madness.
But are you caught?
You keep saying, let's double down. And you keep talking about the bond markets being scared and terrified. But I think we've got to worry less about the bond markets and more about the people in our working class community.
I suppose I'm talking about the system we are currently...
Yeah, it's a sensible, reasonable and logical base to build from that will work far better than the current model as well. And so many people naysay it and, you know, whatever the fucking hell it is. If you can't let them in, it's going to try and hypnotise your tits. Or whatever it is. That the king doesn't know what's a woman's... who has the penis? It doesn't... What's the question? Yeah, these idiots who come out with these ridiculous notions of what we're letting ourselves in for. Oh, no. We've had it in the fairly recent past, politically, of course. The bogeyman cometh. Treatment from the press and the far right. With Corbyn, obviously. We're going to see similar stuff with Zack, but it's just pathetic. And you know that you've sort of got them. You always can tell when they're cornered, because they'll bring up something like trans rights or trans issues, for example, as the sort, you know, what they think is a gotcha moment. What other things? Well, there's a tirade. There's a tirade of them as well, but the hypnosis thing as well is pretty ridiculous as things go.
Living in. You want to change that world, fine, I get that. But are you also,
but that can be dismissed, but I do think the current system that we're in hasn't always been this way. Since Thatcher, neoliberalism came in, and that's what we're suffering now. So what I'm saying isn't some kind of fantasy or idea that we've never had before. I'm talking about what happens in most of Western Europe, and also what we had before Thatcher kind of destroyed any kind of sense of social cohesion.
But I wonder whether you're also slightly surprised by your own popularity at the moment, and whether it's making you think about some of these economic issues, well, you know, more seriously. I mean, you know, Rupert mentioned, you know, Reform have clearly tacked back from some of the more eccentric ideas they were throwing out in their, you know, in their contracts and the last election. You know, are you also having a lot of meetings saying, well, we've got to get our ducks in a row here and stop saying things that spook people? I mean, you know, you spooked people yesterday a little bit, to be honest, on Laura Kuenssberg's show when you talked about, you know, it's money.
Has someone just stolen like Nick Robinson's brain and put it into Krishnan Guru Murthy's head? He's even starting to sound like him a little bit at the end of sentences as well, which is disturbing.
We owe ourselves, and people thought,
this is important.
Does this man not know how the system works?
Well, who did I spook? I spoke to establishment figures, multimillionaires and billionaires, and people who are very wealthy, who surprisingly don't like the idea, many of them, that I want to tax the wealthy, and so they're finding ways to attack the Green Party. Look, I'm really privileged and honoured that the Green Party right now are shooting up in the polls. I think in the last poll, I had the highest net favourability ratings of any party leader. And I also accept that's a total responsibility. The Green Party have gone from a party where we were fighting to get some airtime to say things to a party where I can't stop doing interviews and being given a platform. I always have more to learn. I always have more to discover. So I'm not pretending I know everything. What I am absolutely certain of, and so certain of, is that multimillionaires and billionaires own many of our newspapers, own many of our TV channels, and ultimately...
Yeah, cough, cough. Many of our TV channels... Oh, and good point there, Redif. In the chat, Krishnan pretty much said anyone who isn't a Thatcherite neoliberal is eccentric. These eccentric, non-conservative, non-neoliberal ideas that you have, all of this wacky, crazy, loony, lefty stuff. Oh, here they go again. Oh. You're going to help everyone, are you, with your dog? You might as well be Joseph Stalin. And off they go.
Those people have a very vested interest in trying to discredit any idea or story that challenges the status quo. And the one thing I'm certain of, and people tell me every single day, is the status quo is not working, it is broken, and Labour ultimately exists right now to protect power and wealth in this country, and that's before we even get to the tourism reform. We need a complete clear out of that broken politics. We need something new, different and hopeful, and that's what I'm offering.
I mean, I'd just say it certainly wasn't billionaires and millions.
Yeah, you're going to see some right cretins on the next honours list, that's for sure.
It was reality. And so you've got to differentiate between, billionaires and millionaires and reality. And unfortunately, it would be great if we could worry less about the bond markets. But to do that, we'd have to run a budget surplus. So let's raise more taxes for the spending that you want. Unfortunately, I think that the reality is more important, and that confronting reality and providing a bit of confidence to the world that the UK takes reality seriously.
Well, you're getting to the point here, because the reality is the status quo. And what I'm saying is your reality.
It's not real, it's a dream, it's a fantasy. And no, it's not. It's even when it's perfectly succinctly explained to them.
Is not working, and I think enough people in this country more and more are going, actually, I don't believe that. We've been told this over and over again on TV channels and in newspapers, and the difference is happening. Communities are coming together, people are organising and going, let's have a different political and economic system, and that's what's coming. I want to make sure Nigel Farage isn't in charge of that. I want to make sure communities are.
Zack talks about, we all on this panel don't want political instability. But I think the Green Party and the Reform UK have the exact same technique. They are...
Okay. This is going to be the final bit of this debate, but I'm willing to entertain this notion briefly. Just might, again, warning, have a hernia while streaming, saying that, okay, I'll bite.
Going online, often, TikTok, they're speaking directly to people. Yeah. They're telling them lies.
They're going online and they're going online and on TikTok, and these things. That's of course. That's why they're so aligned in their ways, in their modus operandi. One of them wants to save the planet and tax the rich, and the other one wants to sell the NHS off and lead us into climate disaster.
To people.
I have TikTok. No, but you're telling them lies. And no, that is awful.
Can you name one lie I've said?
Yeah, that a wealth tax would change this country.
I've never said that.
The thing that
No, but that's what you're telling people.
I've said
I didn't say that. Yeah, but it's what you're telling people. Oh no, that's bad. That's really bad. Like, he literally didn't say it. Well, what she means contextually or whatever. But
a wealth tax would reduce inequality in this country.
What you're telling people.
Do you not believe a wealth tax would reduce inequality? Because it seems fairly basic.
I think there's lots of policies that would reduce inequality.
She didn't follow up on the social media thing. It's 2025, and this is a young Labour MP in her 20s. So, again, she knows that it's because of the time that we're in. Sorry, just staggered. But she didn't follow up on that. Pretty lame comparison to make. Oh, that was bad. That was bad.
The wealth tax reduce
and the Labour government
raising.
Not implementing
You've accused me of a lie, so would a wealth tax reduce inequality?
Let me just finally ask you, Rosie, because a lot of people will also be a bit alarmed because of the way politics is changing in Britain at the moment, that a lot of people are wondering whether the only future for the centre and the centre-left and the left is for you to work together to stop reform at the next election. And looking at this conversation, it's not looking very likely at the moment. I mean,
I want people's lives to get better. I don't want the cost of living crisis to continue to burden families. That's what I think of. We can come on a panel like this and we can have the political debates, but ultimately I want to see the policies implemented, the choices made.
I can almost see the next video right now, just intersplicing this into some small sections of tomorrow's horror budget.
that make things better for the ordinary family, the family that I was brought up in, that my life has been good. I've had opportunities because of what the last Labour government did for my childhood. And I want this Labour government to do the same for children growing up. I don't think we're going to be able to do that with this divisive politics that we see.
But if a progressive alliance is the only chance at the next election, are you up for it?
I think the chance of the next election is delivering for families. And I think that's what we'll do.
Thank you all very much indeed for joining us.
That was one final one to take us into double figures, rounding off that debate. I'll change the counter for what it's worth. 10 postman twats, 10 mentions of deliver or variations thereon. Well, how's about that, people? What do you make of the debates? Let me know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching back later on. Goodness me, what a trial. Quite nauseating during certain periods. Especially when Rupert was speaking there. Right, we're gonna have to move on quickly, actually, people. Just get rid of all of this paraphernalia. Yeah, not going to do any post synopsis. I guess I made my feelings clear as we went through that there. So we'll move on to this story. Some of Nigel Farage's old school friends have been coming out of the woodwork and making some serious accusations about racism against them by Nigel Farage. Well, let's just see the clip first, and then we'll get into it. Let's see what's happening. Just gonna let this play through while I top up my drink, people.
A man who was at school with Nigel Farage has told the BBC that the Reform UK leader is being fundamentally dishonest by suggesting that former pupils who claim they witnessed him being racist are not telling the truth. In his first TV interview, Peter D.O.J, who's Jewish, said Mr Farage repeatedly told him that Hitler was right and gassed them when they were teenagers at school in London. Yesterday, Mr Farage denied that he had directly racially abused anyone, but conceded he may have taken part in what he called playground banter. Our political investigations correspondent Joe Pike has this exclusive report.
Are they telling the truth?
No, they're not telling the truth.
How do you feel watching that?
Really angry.
Peter D.O.J can't forget how Nigel Farage made him feel.
Most vivid memories of my school life is Farage repeatedly coming up to me and knowing that I was Jewish, saying Hitler was right and gas them. And that was frequently followed by us, you know, kind of imitating the sound of escaping gas. As the
Sorry, I think we just had some studio problems there, some buffering. We're all back now. That happened just after I started the clip. Apologies, I'm gonna restart the clip now. Thanks for the super chat, Graham. Yeah, no worries about it. It's all good in the chat. Solidarity with Palestine. Thanks again for the super chat. Big up, Graham, in the chat, please, everybody. Evolution or revolution? Solidarity
A man who was at school with Nigel Farage has told the BBC that the Reform UK leader is being fundamentally dishonest by suggesting that former pupils who claim they witnessed him being racist are not telling the truth. In his first TV interview, Peter D.O.J, who's Jewish, said Mr Farage repeatedly told him that Hitler was right and gassed them when they were teenagers at school in London. Yesterday, Mr Farage denied that he had directly racially abused anyone, but conceded he may have taken part in...
But once again, people, the real anti-Semitism is where it's always been. It's on the right.
...what he called playground banter. Our political investigations correspondent Joe Pike has this exclusive report.
Are they telling the truth?
No, they're not telling the truth.
How do you feel watching that?
Really angry.
Peter D.O.J can't forget how Nigel Farage made him feel.
Most vivid memories of my school life is Farage repeatedly coming up to me and knowing that I was Jewish, saying Hitler was right and gas him, and that was frequently followed by us, kind of imitating the sound of escaping gas. As the grandchild of a couple who had escaped from Hitler and Nazi Germany, but whose families left behind had perished in the Holocaust, this was extremely wounding and upsetting. And it wasn't the normal sort of vaguely anti-Semitic banter that you might encounter in school grounds at that time in the 1970s.
No, not some, I don't know, old joke that might have obviously not aged well or whatever. We're talking about serious racist comments, anti-Semitism and bullying as well in the mix. So just revolting. Because he said this isn't just one instance, this persisted.
It was much worse.
Peter is one of more than a dozen former pupils who attended London's Dulwich College in the late 70s and early 80s and who have since claimed they witnessed Nigel Farage being racist.
Are they telling the truth, Mr Farage?
Suddenly, after 49 years, they seem to have perfect recollection. I would say to you, there is a strong political element to this.
OK, again, a slightly different answer to the question. Are they telling the truth?
No, they're not telling the truth.
That response last night has left...
So he can categorically remember from nearly 50 years ago, but they can't, according to him. So yeah, we're talking about 1970s, 1980s. Just doing the maths in my head, ages. But when he was at university, he was part of far right groups, whilst everybody else his age was, the cool kids. Would have been watching alternative comedy and whatnot. He's there with his Thatcher badge.
Peter D.O.J angry.
This is a man who has power, influence, has had a massive impact on the direction of this country, for which, hats off to him. And he is being fundamentally dishonest in everything that he says there.
He's right that this was many decades ago. How can you be sure that your memory is correct, that you're remembering this accurately?
I think anyone who suffers any kind of abuse, it's going to mark their lives. Yeah. And I carried that memory with me very, very strongly.
That sort of thing you're going to remember. And this question comes from, that question came from a white male, So where persecution in society is concerned, he just sort of he can't relate to it. In this case, it's for religious purposes where the bullying is concerned, but the same thing still applies. You're not going to forget incidents like that, are you? And that's another reason why it's not just a speculative allegation, but I think we've had a raid, people, just to sort of interject for a quick moment. Some thanks are due, and welcome to No Justice viewers. No Justice at MTG. I'm sure a lot of regular My Left Eye viewers will be familiar with the channel already, but if you're not, do go and check out no justice. A very warm welcome, everybody. Please hit thumbs up as you join us. We're just getting towards the end of this, I say allegation against Nigel Farage about some allegedly racist comments made during his youth.
And I carried that memory with me very, very strongly.
Some of these allegations were first raised at least 13 years ago, but more were published by The Guardian last week.
I remember him specifically talking about Jew, go home, Hitler was right, singing Gas them all, Jude, and all of these absolutely anti-Semitic comments directed straight at Peter.
Nigel Farage points out this was almost 50 years ago.
You remember stuff, especially those formative years at school.
Martin Rosell is another former Dulwich College pupil, but he's now a local official for the Liberal Democrats.
Is there a political motivation behind you speaking now about Mr Farage?
I don't think so. I'm not doing this as a member of my local party. I'm doing this as a human being who remembers something from 49 years ago. And my recollections are clearly the same as many other people's. His behaviour towards Peter was fairly unpleasant. He would, when Peter answered a question in class, then Nigel would whisper or mutter something like Jew under his breath.
Reform UK have told us these allegations are entirely...
Nigel Farage and his children have German passports.
Without foundation, describing them as disputed recollections from almost 50 years ago. There are certainly ex-pupils who don't remember racism or who don't remember Nigel Farage. Tonight, the Reform leader remains under pressure as questions about his past.
You really need to investigate very deeply. Is this leader of a far-right party perhaps a racist? The one who bangs on and on about immigration day and night. Could he but there are contradicting statements, for example, and the only example, Nigel Farage says he didn't. Are we going to get to the bottom of this one? Like, seriously, for real. You have two people recalling the very same events, and it isn't something that he admitted to and apologised and obviously said that he doesn't have those sentiments any longer. He's flat out denied it because he's full of it. But yeah, get that prick off my screen. Let me know what you think about those air quotes allegations, people. Moving swiftly on, because I do have to get through this. Thanks a lot for your patience, particularly one viewer this evening, regular viewer in fact, but is actually a regular participant in the Defend Our Juries protests, which we've covered on My Left Eye. I'm also part of Defend Our Juries myself, but enough about me. I'm going to play this excellent testimony from some... You're still in the chat, yes. Shouldn't you be getting an early night? But yeah, Moshi on Toast, they're in the chat. Made this great testimony, which I'm about to play you. No spoilers. I'm not going to... Well, it's sort of... Them being in the chat in itself is a bit of a spoiler. But as to the outcome of... well, it was just the plea hearing today, wasn't it, at Westminster Magistrates Court, so... also catching up with somebody else who we interviewed a few months ago now. Pete, if you remember that one, who was arrested at the same D.O.J protest, which was your first, I believe, at the time, the Parliament Square protest. So first round of plea hearings underway. Let's see what Moishi on Toast had to say just prior to going to court.
Hi, my name is Moisha, and tomorrow I'll be travelling from my home in Dundee to Westminster Magistrates Court to enter a plea after being charged as a terrorist. I was arrested and charged for holding a cardboard sign while peacefully and lawfully protesting in August. So far, the Crown Prosecution and District Judge Michael Snow have indicated that my trial will be pushed forward, despite the judicial review of the law I was protesting being ongoing,
and big up in the
and
chat,
also
please,
will
everyone.
not let me litigate its lawfulness as part of my defence. They've also indicated that more than 200 protesters who are also being charged as terrorists will have to share half a day of trial between 5 of us. That's around half an hour each to go through evidence, witness statements, cross-examination, prosecution and defence arguments. This absolute farce of a fair trial is not only deeply unjust to us protesters, who, again, were engaged in lawful and peaceful protest, which is a protected right of free speech in this country, it's actually antithetical to our democracy. Choosing to rush these trials through, the state has shown its hand. It intends to use the existing legal framework available to silence dissent and curtail our rights. Because of this, I've chosen not to comply with court procedure and will be risking further arrest and a charge of contempt of court.
Whoa.
Instead of entering a plea, I will express my disdain for the treatment of our protected rights and the UK's ongoing support for ethnic cleansing in Palestine by reading aloud from a list of more than 18,000 names. Names of children murdered by Israel, by genocide and under apartheid. Please share this video if you care about democracy, freedom of speech, and opposing genocide.
Well said, very well said. Let's please big up. Preach. That was amazing. And I can reveal, sort of spoiler alert, by the fact that they are in the chats, that they weren't dragged away to the Gulag, fortunately, but just removed by security, I believe. But very well done. That was very defiant as well. And also you potentially risk contempt of court when you do that, so very brave protest. Turning into a real fucking Marine. And further updates to come, of course, with the trial. So yeah, let's big up this ledge. I've got you I've just thrown this together pretty quickly. Special picture, well done. Now in the viewers legends section for contributions towards non-violent direct action. Very good. Thanks a lot for sharing the clip as well, really do appreciate it. Also, in a separate group, but at Westminster, today was another friend of mine, Pete. No video from Pete, but he sent me a picture of himself outside. So again, just a shout out to Pete if you're watching, probably back later on at this hour, but he's a great guy, someone who I've been out on the streets with, protesting quite a few times in the past, and again one of those who participated in the first Parliament Square Defend Our Juries protest. So shout out to Pete if you're watching. Solidarity to Moishi on Toast and Pete. Legends both. I'm certain that Pete will appreciate me just reminding you and repeating the fact that he holds a record for the most amount of complimentary biscuits, packets of complimentary biscuits that you can have when you are incarcerated in a police station. So I can't remember the exact number, but he does still hold the record. And they were custody creams. Custody creams. Okay, moving on. Thanks for the Palestine flags in the chat. That does actually provide me with a very good segue. To be honest, just moving on from D.O.J. Keep you up to date with everything to do with D.O.J. Oh, and one final thing just on that. We will be following the Manchester protest on Saturday, just as a reminder, we're going to have some exclusive footage from that as well. And then on Sunday, over to the Your Party inaugural conference, so a very busy weekend coming on my left eye. Seriously though, very pleased that is going to be coming to Manchester. But on Gaza, just one very quick clip to play. Just need to upload this one actually. Oh, it was already there. One moment, it's just right here. It concerns the reporting and all this BBC stuff now that's flying around. But amongst all of the BS, I picked out a really good clip here. Rachel Shabai, who had this to say about which way the BBC's bias obviously lies. One moment, people.
Obviously,
just resize this.
Big pushback coming from BBC staff, particularly over Robbie Gibb, but not only, but to focus on Robbie Gibb. It is extraordinary that this has been allowed to go on for so long. This person who's a, self-styled proper Thatcherite conservative. I remember Emily Maitlis, who of course used to work at the BBC on Newslight a few years ago, saying that it was like having an active Conservative agent in the BBC. Several staffers have said, he always pushes from the right. He always pushes people to be more right-wing. There's never criticism of, things... There's never criticism from a left-wing perspective. And this whole idea of the BBC being too liberal on these things that it's been accused of being too liberal on, particularly Gaza, is just madness. It's just gaslighting on an epic scale. If anything, as we all know, people have been watching with increasing frustration as the BBC has massively failed to accurately report a war described as genocide in Gaza. But back to Gibb, I do think his position is unsustainable. MPs and staff think he should be removed. Bectu, the biggest union in the BBC, is critical of him. I think he's going to get quite a grilling in that meeting tomorrow, and I'd be very surprised if he's still holding on to his position.
It'll be an interesting...
Yeah, that's the reality. That's the truth of it all. Well said there, Rachel. To share that with you, in case that one passed you by. Just need to hastily give the members another shout out before we round things off. Please do stick with us though. I'll see if there's a potential raid coming up. So I did want to get into one or two other matters around the judiciary. Jury trials potentially ending for most crimes, for example, and a few other bits, but we'll get onto those later in the week. Unfortunately, I'm out of time at the moment. Yeah, really good summary there by Rachel. I totally agree, Andy. So thanks again, members. Just to remind you, if you're watching back later on, super thanks are available. There's also a Buy Me a Coffee page. Check that out in the description of this stream or any other content on the channel. Please do give us a share around your social media as well, please, people. We're just 5 subscribers away from 5,500. And make sure you've hit thumbs up on the stream. I'll just have a nosy around the interweb for a potential raid. I'll be back with more streams later in the week, of course. Excuse me. So you can hit the notification bell as well. Make sure you don't miss out. we have this space. So we'll do a raid into there. I won't be able to join you on this one. I do have to get off. It's been a long day. A lot to get through tomorrow as well. So that's all locked in. But do say hello from me when you get over to this space if you're watching live. So that will be it from me, your humble host, Lefty. This has been the Brews at 10 on My Left Eye. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. You've been awesome in the chat and everything. Take care. Free Palestine. Power to the people. My Left Eye. I'll be seeing you soon.